Eliminating barriers towards inclusion for individuals with disabilities is not a solo proposition in order to make tangible progress. It requires all of us to throw our hat in the ring. Tracee Garner is an international best-selling author of 14 books, a dynamic speaker, and disability advocate who uses writing to elevate African Americans in a positive light, showcasing them overcoming adversity to thrive. She also finds passion in helping individuals with disabilities realize their independent living goals. She joined me this week to have a conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion, along with sharing her passion for writing and what makes a solid writer enjoy their passion even more. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. We began our conversation by unearthing what it is that ignites Garner's passion to make a measurable and impactful difference in the world of writing and accessibility.
Yeah, so my name is Tracee Garner. I am an advocate for people with disabilities, and I'm also disabled myself. I've been a lifelong person living with a disability. I was diagnosed at the age of 2 with muscular dystrophy, spinal muscular atrophy, and I got my first wheelchair in elementary school. It wasn't until college that I really found writing, and I've written 15 books so far, mostly fiction, but recently got into nonfiction and kind of a self-help, inspirational, motivational book for other people with disabilities, but honestly, we don't need motivation sometimes. Sometimes we do, but most of the time we're our own best motivators, but also for people that surround people with disabilities, such as professionals, service providers, parents, and other caregivers and guardians. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm from the DC area. I live in Washington, DC, or on the Virginia side of the district, and have been a Virginia native for 45 years.
Well, there's nothing wrong with longevity, isn't there?
Nope, I like it. Well, I could do without all the cold and the snow constant, but I do love Virginia.
You and me both. You know, I am a Canadian kid, and I was born in January, but I don't like the cold either.
I know. I was born in October, and it just starts getting cold, but it's still kind of nice, like the first 2 weeks of October. Even
absolutely. So tell me, where did your passion for writing come from? I'm curious.
Honestly, my passion for writing was really born out of depression. I was depressed in college, having a hard time pursuing my academics, getting really bad grades, only in certain classes in like math for liberal arts. And so I just, when the teacher was talking about math, I don't know what you're talking about. So I'm going to go and I turned my paper over from a math problem I couldn't solve. And I just started writing. And so it also stemmed from not just the difficult time I was having with my academics, but also from just rejection, being rejected by, a dude that I met in college and that not working out. And I put them in a book and made them, the alpha male, a kind person, not the jerk that I knew, but somebody that was really nice. And I just love stories. And so that just seemed like a natural thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that your books are dedicated to promoting and depicting African Americans in a positive light, sort of
That's
overcoming adversity and meeting success. So tell me why promoting African Americans in such a positive light is so important to you.
Well, because I'm African American for one, but sometimes they're not always. Mostly African American men sometimes are not depicted in a really positive light. Of course, there's tons of romance authors now, but I've been writing for 20 years now, and I had a book come out in my 20s, and so before that big push to include more voices of color, it wasn't, a big deal back then, but now it is. And it's important for me to tell those stories. I've thought about writing other stories of other people, of other groups. It's just something I never really felt that comfortable with doing. I've only had like one interracial romance with a white male and a black female, but for the most part, I just love writing about my people, but my career isn't over yet. So I still could very well, but it just hasn't been something I've been interested in. And of course, I read every group of color there is. It's just for me, the actual writing is focused on Black families and Black people.
And Maurice, tell me, what do you think makes a good writer?
What do I think makes a good writer? So many things. Just the ability to think outside the box, to come up with these answer the what if questions, to take something, just a small something. Most of my ideas come from the news. So I've been fascinated with people that end up on the news for whatever crazy reason. They ended up on the news. And then I always wonder about them. How did they get there? Usually something bad, predicated that. And then how do I give them a happy ending? Because I write romance, I'm looking for the happily ever after. So you hear about somebody on the news and they never come back and tell you how that person's story ended, or they don't give you any update, or usually just if they died, that's all they told you, and so died. But I think an ability for writers to take a single idea and really to flesh it out and to really run with it. So, that takes a really imaginative mind and a creative ability to do that.
And I know that you're also a dynamic course creator. So tell me, what sort of ignites your passion for creating good courses?
I just love teaching. I taught at the local community college where I live for almost 15 years as an adjunct professor. And I taught in the continuing education and adult education space. So I was mostly teaching only adults, mostly women, married women, single women, women at the end of their careers, looking to start their writing journey and publish a book. And I just love, I really have a heart for aspiring writers, people who are not quite done with their books. I know how hard it is to finish just one single book. And it actually is still hard even now, finishing book 15 and book 16. So, that's just what I think about is I love teaching and I love conveying concepts to people and making things easier for people to understand.
And another one of your passions, of course, is helping to promote independent living for folks with disabilities. And as someone with cerebral palsy myself, I can fully respect that. So tell me why it's so important to you to promote independent living for people with disabilities, and what sort of work still needs to be done so that can be accomplished on a broader scale.
Wow, so much needs to be done. That's a full-on question. That's a whole nother show, probably several half hours long.
Yeah.
But honestly, when I was learning to advocate for myself, I had such great parents who advocated for me in the school system and assisted me with everything that I have right now. But eventually, I had to learn to do that stuff on my own. And so learning to speak up for myself was really cultivated a passion in me, because I was talking about issues that I needed So even though I need them, I'm really helping to bring others along by advocating for more transportation, better access to healthcare, assistive technology, in doctors' offices, and being able to get, email exams that we need, and how hard that is and how undignifying that is. So those are some of the areas where I would speak up for myself and the hard time that I'm having. But then obviously lots of other people with disabilities in similar situations could glom on and could, benefit from my own advocacy. So that's kind of where that came from. And then those similar issues are the things that we are still having trouble with. Limited transit options if you don't drive or you can't drive for whatever reason, getting access to health care, more so women's and men too, physical exams, and the attitudinal barriers that doctors, people that are in charge of building accessible spaces, the attitudinal barriers are really some of the hardest things to overcome because that requires a whole mindset shift. So just things that I encounter every day. We're in a housing crisis. There's lots of people with intellectual disabilities and physical disabilities too that can't afford to live on their own. It's not that that we do need support and we need community assistance, but there's still no surefire way to make that happen and to make living on your own, be realized for people who are still dependent on caregivers, paying them, sometimes having to pay them out of pocket or to supplement the small, tiny little wage that they receive. Nobody wants to work for that. And so that's impossible to find people to provide assistance to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking from personal experience, I know that finding male personal support workers is also a challenge. Would you agree with that?
Definitely. Well, it's whatever you are. If you're a female, it's hard to find females that are willing and that are capable. And if you're a male, it's also hard. Most of the caregiver industry definitely is female. And then someone who can relate and someone who treats you with dignity and respect. A lot of caregivers aren't used to us as middle-aged people with disabilities that still lead active lifestyles. And so they sometimes want to treat us like we have Alzheimer's or other cognitive limitations and functioning when we're still active. And you're not coming in here to sit, with us and we're going to watch Young and the Restless. Like I have to get ready for work, I got to get up, I got to get dressed. And so that's also been difficult, is the way in which the caregiver industry values their own service, and then the way that they treat you as a person.
Yeah, Tracee, I live by the saying that inclusion is the gateway to independence, isn't it?
That's right. That's right. If we were all included in more sectors, we'd have a more robust and diverse way of solving complex problems.
And Tracee, I'm curious to ask you about your own definition of personal and professional fulfillment and what that looks like for you.
That is interesting. It's hard. I always think about personal, like sometimes exercise. It's really hard to be exhausted when you have a physical disability. So there's always looking for those outlets. It's sometimes hard to do self-care, manicures and pedicures when so many places are inaccessible. But I think personal fulfillment does come with just, from within sometimes. Even though you don't have access to everything, you can still make a way, you can still find a way to be fulfilled with your relationships. You do have to step outside of your comfort zone often in order to branch out and to try to meet new people. And then also, from spiritual practices, religious activities, church, which I've always been really active in. My dad was a preacher, so I've been in the church, all my life, but then kind of finding my own way and doing leadership in the church setting and doing other things. So it really is a personal choice, but it's also important for you yourself to define what fulfillment is. Some people are happy working and doing advocacy, like that's their lifelong thing. And that used to be my thing too, but then sometimes it would get exhausting. So I knew it was important for me to find other ways to have leisure. And even I can get wrapped up in writing books, every day in, day out, writing. But even that, I need to take a break from and try to find more fun things to do. So, and I think people should make if you do have a disability, make a list of things that you enjoy doing. That way, when you're stressed and you're kind of bogged down in the day-to-day operations of your life, you can come back to that list and be like, oh, I really like doing this. Why don't I go do that? So, and it's okay if some of those things involve, things that aren't necessarily great for you. It's okay if it involves eating out, which many people do too frequently, but that's okay. Give yourself a pass. That's personally fulfilling to you. Being with people, going to movies. There's always some extreme that you could do too much of, but if that's what makes you happy and you're not harming anyone, then there's no reason that can't be something that's personally fulfilling to you.
Yeah, and Tracee, part of my professional background is helping folks with physical and intellectual disabilities locate and maintain gainful employment. And one of the things that I have sort of dedicated my adult life to is educating employers about the positive benefits of hiring people with disabilities. Because, when you give someone with a disability a job, it's more than giving them a paycheck, you're also giving them a sense of purpose as well. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on how we create more employment equity for folks with disabilities and how that's connected to eliminating social isolation as well.
Yeah, I think that one thing I would say that sometimes people with disabilities don't consider often is just volunteer positions. Things like volunteermatch.org and other places where they can volunteer for a time until they get, the opportunity. One time, sometimes if you see someone working for free and they're doing a wonderful job and they're passionate and they really, enjoy that, what you can see is that's giving them an opportunity to be engaged, to learn a new skill. And I encourage, everyone that I work with that's looking for a job to think about employment opportunities, but it also volunteer opportunities, but also it goes back to those attitudinal barriers that I mentioned that, the hiring person is, looking at you during the interview like they're not sure if you can do the job. Obviously, if you applied, then you believe that you can. And so it's not for them to say, it's just for them to wait, give you an opportunity, and then you can demonstrate how you can do a good job. So I think that that's some of the important things. And also think outside the box. So many parents saw that there was a deficit with employment opportunities. And so they created, the car wash, the small restaurant, and all these different things they created so that their children could have a small business opportunity and they could make the hiring decisions. And so we have to think outside the box, but we also have to give everyone an opportunity to at least try to do the position and then offer the supports to them to permit them to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a few more for you. The first one is I'm curious to ask you about how would you define or what does a fully inclusive society look like for you personally for individuals with disabilities?
Wow, everything is accessible in a fully inclusive environment, and people have relaxed their prejudices against, sitting someone with someone at lunch, or, not even thinking twice about inviting someone over who doesn't look like you or who you're not sure about can join you and, be able to enjoy the meal. And then just chipping in, just acting like, we're all humans first, and relaxing some of those, those things that we feel about each other about, well, I'm not sure if they would like to go, or I'm not sure, what if we get someplace and it's not accessible? And also an inclusive environment would mean that everything's accessible, that somebody before I got there already thought about that and made, made preparation for anyone like me and you to participate. So that's what a totally inclusive society would look like. And in buildings would be accessible, apartments would be ready to move in without so many modifications. They could just easily be flip a switch and things turn or are modular in a way that they can be more accessible.
And for you, I'm curious to know your perspective on how do you think government can work better for individuals with disabilities?
Well, I think that people have a lot of issue with government, and I understand that. But I also would say government were some of the first people to mandate accessibility standards and inclusive practices. So, it's the private sector sometimes that's having a hard time. They don't ensure that there's a certain number of people with disabilities, at least not all of them. Most of the businesses follow a government model of, mandating people with disabilities be like, 10 or 20% of your entire, group of employees that you hire, affirmative action, some of those practices. So as bad as rap as government gets, they have still been the front runners, being a model for people. I think it is important that they give some benefits, because some disabilities are environmentally created. So, it's kind of some of it is of our own making and other things that are in the air and, but not everything is. Some of the things are going to happen no matter what. So I don't want to have anybody come at me that, disability is environmental. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that government has created certain entitlement programs that I think people can be more grateful for. Of course, do I wish Social Security was more? Of course. Do I wish that people could have a little bit, could work and receive supplemental security? Of course. But those programs don't have to exist at all. And, I'm not saying to be grateful. We need more. There needs to be more funds put into the pipeline so that people can really live and have a livable wage. But I am hesitant to blame government for the lack of things they do when there are some things that they do that do make a difference in people's lives.
And I guess the same question to from the private sector point of view. I know you and I share the same passion of wanting to sort of engage business in the conversation. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on how businesses can be leaders in this regard.
Well, it'd be great if they could eclipse the government in their hiring and in their inclusive practices, because honestly, if they are private and they don't receive any funds, then they also have more leeway to do a little bit more. They're not beholden to federal mandates. They're a private sector, so they could be completely radical in their thinking about being more welcoming to people with disabilities, hiring more than is expected or requested, hiring more than social norms. So they really have an opportunity to do that, especially if they don't receive federal funds. When they do receive funding from different sectors, then they're kind of pushed and made. And so some of them do the bare minimum, but they should look at it as a plus when they don't have to be beholden to federal guidelines to really go and be above and beyond. And because it's such a good PR move, if that's what they're really thinking about, then they should think about their bottom line. I wish that they weren't thinking about that because they have limiting thoughts about that. Well, if I do this, I make this accessible, it's going to cost me money. They should really look at it as an investment into, I can get more people to buy on and buy into my products that I'm selling because I'm so open. And all the people with disabilities that came to the company, like Target, for instance. I love Target. Every time I see a person in a wheelchair in one of their commercials, I am like so full of pride. I'm smiling because I'm seeing the imagery of people like me, especially during Halloween. They always have some little kid who uses a wheelchair and they kind of deck out his costume and incorporate the wheelchair. So I'm like a serious fan of Target, but it's only because of those images that have made me say, oh, I'm accepted here. I can go in here and shop. And people, and they have, even in their advertising, have made me feel welcome. And so I'm more likely to patron them, as opposed to, I won't, I'm not saying Walmart doesn't do that, but, I haven't seen it as regularly as I've seen it in some other commercials.
Yeah, I always tell employers to embrace the fact that hiring people with disabilities is a competitive advantage, isn't it? And that representation matters, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. I get so giddy when I see a Target commercial in a person with a disability. And I've even seen a mannequin in a wheelchair. I want to say it was at a Kohl's display once. And so that to me was even like, wow, most people, able-bodied people, don't notice those things, but we do. And so we also know when it's not there, and when the customer service is not there to be more accommodating or to help you shop. All of those things mean I'm either coming more frequently or I'm never coming back again because of whatever your practices are.
Yeah, lived experience makes a difference, doesn't it?
Definitely.
Yeah, and Tracee, my final question for you is how do you think you want your personal and professional legacy to be defined?
Well, I wanted to be, there's a quote by Thurgood Marshall, I believe. I did the best I can with what I had. And that to me is kind of my mantra that, even though people perceive us to have limitations, we're doing really well with whatever we have. So that's what I want to always come back to, is that even though I had a disability, which you think is very limiting, I worked, the heck out of that and made it look, at least like it was easy, and at least that it was tolerable for me, and that I did everything that I possibly could, even despite, using the wheelchair or not being able to move around as much as I want to, or not being able to travel the country as frequently, as often as I want to. I still work this thing as best that I can. And so that's what I want people to think about when they think about me or my long-term impact. And I'm just, so proud too that my books are out there forever. Written words will be around forever, and published books just keep coming around and around, even long after you're gone. So that's something that I'm really proud of about my own legacy and what I'm leaving behind.
A lasting legacy of words, absolutely. Yeah. And tell me, Tracee, if people want to get connected with you, what's the best way they can do that?
Yeah, people can visit me at TraceeGarner.com. That's TRACEE Garner, GARNER.com. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at TGarner. That's TEE Garner. They can visit with me anytime, send me a shout out, and use the contact page on my website at TraceeGarner.com. And I'm on Amazon. My books are on Amazon under my full name, Tracee Garner, and also Tracee Lydia Garner, which is what I write my fiction titles under. So I look forward to connecting with people if they want to send something or just say hi.
Well, Tracee, I really enjoyed engaging in conversation with you about inclusion, diversity, equity, and equality. Your work in the space and time on my behalf is most appreciated, and I want to thank you for being here this afternoon.
Sure. Thank you so much.